Chapter 15, though, also has some other interesting stuff, particularly for Latter-day Saints and their understanding of the Gospel of John, where Jesus makes reference to John chapter 10, verse 16, and the other sheep. So, maybe we could read that. Why don't we start off, let's see, verse 14. Camille, would you like to start reading for us?
And not at any time hath the Father given me commandment that I should tell it unto your brethren at Jerusalem. Neither at any time hath the Father given the other tribes of the house of Israel, whom the Father hath led away out of the land. But this much did the Father command me, that I should tell unto them, that other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd.
Okay, so John chapter 10, verse 16. The Jews clearly misunderstood what he was talking about there, and the Saviour tells us that the reason they didn't understand it was because of this iniquity and stiff-neckedness. And who did they think that he was referring to?
Gentiles.
That's kind of interesting. I've kind of gone through and looked at non-Latter-day Saint commentaries of John 10:16 to say, how do people look at it? Every single time that I've seen, they've gone through and they say, this is the Gentiles. But 3Nephi and the Saviour here teaches us that this is something very different.
But doesn't that go back to the covenant as well?
Yes.
That he made the covenant that the gospel would go to the children of Abraham and from them to all the others. And this is a reflection of that very same covenant.
Well, I think that that's what he's talking about in chapter 30 when he says, I have come to you because of the covenant. That's why he's coming here, is fulfilling that covenant. So, who are the other sheep then? Who does the Saviour teach us?
Well, obviously it's the Nephites, but then he goes on in chapter 16 to say there's other branches too, namely the lost tribes would represent other, and perhaps other groups of which we have no knowledge.
Well, and I was going to bring that up. If you look and I know we're supposed to go into chapter 16, but here in the first verse he says, And verily, verily, I say unto you, that I have other sheep which are not of this land, neither of the land of Jerusalem, neither in any parts of the land round about whither I have been to minister, and I am going to go to another one. So there's at least 4 different groups of people, from the implication of this verse.
It reminds me of back in 2 Nephi 29 when he says, I shall speak and the Nephites shall write it. I'll speak and the Jews will write it. I'll speak and the lost tribes will write it. And I'll speak unto all nations of the earth and they shall write it. Who is that? I don't know. But clearly his ministry was much broader than we have evidence of here.
Right. But the Book of Mormon helps us to see that it was much broader than just the biblical record. And that's one of those places where the Book of Mormon is very helpful to teach us that Jesus is the Christ. Okay, let's go on to chapter 17. Bob, would you like to read verses 1 through 3 for us, please?
If I must.
Please.
Behold, now it came to pass that when Jesus had spoken these words, he looked round about again on the multitude, and he said unto them, Behold, my time is at hand. I perceive that ye are weak, that ye cannot understand all my words, which I am commanded of the Father to speak unto you at this time. Therefore go ye unto your homes, and ponder upon the things which I have said, and ask of the Father in my name, that ye may understand, and prepare your minds for the morrow, and I come unto you again.
Thank you. I find this interesting. My time is at hand. Clearly the Saviour has other things to do. I think that life is busy for a resurrected God, and he can only do so many things. But the fact that he stays says something about him, doesn't it?
It is, the Book of Mormon, like the Restoration Scriptures in general, reveal to us a God who is clearly a God with passions, a God who is affected by other person's feelings. I mean, the very fact that he's going to say, okay, I'll stay a little longer.
But I think that idea seems to suggest, too, that time is a different kind of sense of time than we do. Not this pressing time, that time and an agenda directs him, but the needs and opportunities and blessings of his children direct him. And at times, it is better for us if he departs. And there are times when it is the better blessing is for him to be there with us, so to speak. That's a bigger one than saying, I've got so many things on my to-do list.
Yes. What about verse 2 here? He says, I perceive that you are weak and you cannot understand all of my words which I'm commanded. I almost imagine, I'm a very visual person, and so I kind of try and imagine things, but I can almost imagine the Saviour standing up, having this multitude, and him seeing the glazed looks on everybody. I've certainly seen that in my classes sometimes, and you just know, why? You have the Saviour of the world there with you. Why would they be perceiving that they are weak? What do you think's going on here?
He's just taught some remarkable doctrines that, for the most part, probably are the first time that this has started to come together for them. And there are some teachings, it seems like, that become more important and understandable only with time and our opportunity to ponder that.
Okay.
And this may be one of those.
Yeah. And if we think back how long they've been going, day one, right?
Yeah.
We think that, and the Saviour was, even if he was just all of those people going up one by one to touch him, and that took hours.
Yeah, when you look at chapter 11 that way, and it points out that every one of these people came up one by one, singly, to touch the feet and hands and side of Christ.
We're talking hours.
Yeah, I mean, even if you did 5 seconds each individual with Christ, that's 3.5 hours, and there's no way anyone was standing with a sundial going, hey, right? So
again, that's the idea of time, and that time seems to be almost irrelevant in that way for him.
But in addition to that, he's taught them the Sermon on the Mount. He's taught them about the fulfilling of the law of Moses. So this has been hours and over and above.
Well, and then he's ended here, chapter 16, with Isaiah, which would make anybody's eyes close, right? I mean,
well, you know, I see two, weak, tired, but weak too, in the sense of other than persons who kept this record. This would be like sitting at the feet. Imagine sitting at the feet of Jesus for hours and hours and hours with everything he said, and you're not taking notes, and you're just sort of in a state of spiritual shock from the whole thing. You're just blown away by this. You know, in fact, you'll feel this sense of frustration. I know I'm not going to remember all this. Right. But the instruction he gives them is so tender. It's to go home. Go home and ponder on what we've talked about.
And ask the Father to help you understand.
Yeah.
I think this is something, you know, we can learn here. Here is the master teacher at work. And when his students don't understand, it's not just that he has to reiterate it or tell a story or go around here, but there's something in the learning process that only comes when we take the time to stop and ponder and pray and ask for the Father to help us to understand.
Well, and one of the other part of that instruction, which I find fascinating, that you see the Book of Mormon concerned with this, and Joseph Smith did as well, but this, prepare your minds. This isn't just thinking, this is the very process by which you think. Preparing your mind to be able to accept truth in a way that you didn't before, or to structure your thinking process. I mean, that's more than just, I want you to think new thoughts. I want you to think differently.
But I think, as I'm just thinking as we're talking right here now, if this were all it was, is sitting at the feet of the Savior and hearing him teach, in some ways that could have happened in premortal life. Isn't that part of also what we have come here to the earth to do? It is what he says back here in chapter 15, verse 2, that reminds me also of what he says during his 3-year ministry. Therefore, those who remembereth these sayings of mine and do with them, him will I raise up at the last day. It's one letting sink in our minds. But how does that mean the way we live our lives every day? And there's something about that laboratory of experience that has to be part of the gospel as well as hearing the word.